Thank you.
I will now want to call upon the team for the second panel, which is going to be the IP protection, a valuable tool for an economic upscale. And I would also want to introduce Gunjan Chawla Arora. She is the assistant professor and head the Center for IPR Institute of Law, Nirma University. She's going to be the moderator for this session. And we have the speakers, Dr. Hemang Shah and Dr. Vivekanandan BC. I would briefly like to introduce Gunjan. She is been in the academics for the past 6 years and is an academician and a full-time researcher. She's also penned down various articles and blogs on various subjects of law. She's also penned a book called Defenses to Patent Infringement Suit. She's also a ardent reader and researcher in the field of IP. She's currently associated with Nirma University. Over to you, Gunjan, and welcome the speakers for the second panel today.
Thank you so much, Angela ma'am, for having me here. And on behalf of IPPU, I extend my welcome to Professor Dr. B.C. Vivekanandan and Dr. Hemang Shah for being here with us for the second session of the IP Fest today. The topic for the session is IP protection as a tool for, as a valuable tool for economic upscale. So I think this is a really great chronology in which we've been proceeding from the very first talk, because there we were talking about why IP protection and what is IP protection. And now we move forward to the second stage as to how the IP protection is going to help us in when we talk about the macro level analysis and impact of IP protection. Today we have with us Professor Dr. V.C. Vivekananda, who is the Vice Chancellor of Hidayatullah National Law University. Welcome, sir, for the session. And we also have Dr. Hemang Shah, who's a senior engineer and head of IP at Qualcomm Technology Licensing. Welcome both of you, and I'm sure this topic is something which is very important, and it will help us in understanding the triology of innovation, IP protection, and investment in research and development when we talk about the economy as a whole. I won't take much time, and moving to our first speaker for the day, Dr. V.C. Vivekanandan. I'd just like to briefly introduce him. He's the Vice Chancellor for HNLU, and he's been a teacher, researcher, and an academic administrator for about 3 decades now. And his key specialization areas include intellectual property, internet law, e-governance, and business laws. And while he was on Leon at the Nalsar University, Hyderabad, he also served as the chair professor of IP and director of the Nalsar Proximate Education under the MHRD chair of the Government of India. And he was also an elected member of the ALAC ICANN, and he's been also the official Indian delegate to the WIPO meets. So, and his research areas are include IPR, internet laws and governance, and international trade and IPR, among others. So I welcome you, sir, on board, and without taking much time, I would just want you to take the stage and discuss your knowledge and share your knowledge across.
Okay. Good evening, Ms. Anjula, and anchor today, Professor Gunjan, and my other panelist, Shri Hemang Shah. In fact, I should have reduced the bio which I gave, because at my position, there is no further economic upscale for me in academics. So I almost reached the pinnacle. So hereafter I should have a small byline or a footnote and that could save a little bit of time. So anyway, coming back to this topic of economic upscale, I'm pretty sure that we got a hardcore industry person who will, look at the whole aspect, starting on the return on investment, and then the bottom line, and then the global as well as national. I thought for the various stakeholders in this meeting, could be industry people, could be academics, could be many people. How do we connect this? Because there's a general proposition. There is theory and practice are different. And then quite often I see my students tell that we just come to sometimes to law school because, we need to have this formal degree, whereas actual thing only starts in the field. That is one side of the view. But I do believe that without a proper foundation, such kind of practice cannot take you long, or an economic upscale is only feasible only when we have some strong foundations. So in that context, I thought I will share a few things with you. And being an online program, which lacks the fist of being in direct contact in audience, best is to use some PPT so that, people can really follow it up, because screen and, watching in screen is a very tedious thing. So let me share my screen with the audience for about 15 minutes or so, and then probably listen to the other speaker, and then probably questions can be taken. So let me start with talking about the title, what we say. I hope my screen is visible. Yes,
Yes.
thank you. At any point with that, please do let me know if it sometimes it goes off. So if I look at it, this is where we are today in economics. Earlier, economics was lab to the market. You produce, it goes, that's it. There is nothing in between coming. But today's context of, if I were to put IPR in perspective, the lab gets to the market through a process of law. A process of law, which is an enabling law, intellectual property rights, various laws. They are called enablers. It is not penalizing, it's enablers. And it also has a penalizing provision, which you call infringement, enforcement, all that. Because the earlier lab to the market was in that particular economic world, or upscale, you call it, aptly for your title, is quite less complicated. So this is what we call, what are the economy we had? We had a hunting-gathering economy, and then we moved to agricultural economy, then we moved to industrial economy, and then we are calling knowledge economy. And in the earlier three economic upscale, when you really look, the intellect part played a role, but not the central role. I can protect my industrial production by having walls, electric fence, guards, or watchdogs, right? But today's knowledge economy cannot have just that kind of walls and other things to protect you. It only has a fencing tool, which is brought in by a legal proposition called intellectual property rights. That we need to keep it in mind. Right? If you want to go back to the old natural world, hunting gathering world, nobody stops you. But the point is not possible where you are. So in this context, the whole economic thing definitely depends upon a legal intervention, which we call intellectual property right. And the very word property and intellect really is talking about economics and creativity. And rights normally is where law comes to play a role. So law comes in here for certain level of stability. That's why I said, when I say lab law to the market, very quickly, few minutes to take you, you had agricultural economy, you had an industrial economy, we are talking knowledge economy. We are even moving to a new thing called creative economy. A driverless car, artificial intelligence based systems. These are all now already knocking the door. So you really find this transition of how macro level, our economic things are happening. And who is the driver's seat? That's the whole point. Not that if you have knowledge economy, not that we won't have agriculture economy, we do have. But the driver's seat has been always, this change is what is happening, which is facilitated by technological upscale. And the whole economic upscale is now dependent on this. Agricultural economy was simpler. Generations it took for some value addition. People never spoke to each other. They are very, very proud communities which don't want to share because there was an absence of a proper legal system. So best is to guard yourself. Your entire India's Ayurvedic system, we don't know, 75%, 80% are not there today because it was guarded as trade secrets. And so what today's modern thing is, even though trade secret is accepted, modern thing talks about patent systems and other systems. If I move to industrial economy, basically it is scientific development on platform, standardization and rationalization. These are the two key things which were really taking industrial economy, and whichever countries, whichever societies were in the forefront are today we call quote unquote developed countries. But they had a phase. Then we have moved to knowledge economy. What is knowledge economy? Short life cycle technologies. Software patents are coming, increased IP complexity. Once upon a time, software has given you free if you buy a big computer. Now it's the other way around. You are given a machine free because you are really talking code is the king. So that is how you have to see the transformative thing happening. So utilization of IP, freedom to operate methods, all these things is now part of knowledge economy. And what is knocking the door already is called creative economies. Creativity as the key driver. IP value independent of a physical carrier. Transforming information, ideas to assets, and human capital, and also instead of outsourcing, we're talking insourcing. These are all some of the what I call beginnings of a new phase. The big question from Indian point of view, which part we are in? We can very optimistically talk we are in knowledge economy, or we do have creative economy, I don't deny. But the point is we are predominantly still agrarian economy. And to an extent, a stable industrial economy. We are not that bad. Anything is shut down, still India can produce. But the point is, we are trying to get into the knowledge economy. We are trying to do into knowledge economy within Indian context. And that particular urge and realization earnestly started post-90 when we had liberalization. Till that time, our concentration was on distribution, not innovation. But the point is, how much you will distribute if you don't have something to distribute. And when you look at only distribution, you are stagnant, you are frozen at a point. So when innovation started, I would say India was a late starter, even within Asian economies, including the neighbor whom we always try to compete and envy, China, has started much, much early in the 80s itself. Even though they are a communist regime, they were looking at an economy which is different. Probably they saw the writing in the wall. After all, they have the longest wall in the world, so they can even see that. So, but Indian context was fits and starts. We were down in the dumps. Then we opened up a little. We are scared whether again we'll be colonized. And then, all that problem. It took 10 more years for even to come out of the fear that liberalization will bring fruits. So earnestly, I would say, in the last 15, 20 years is the game. But always in life, not always the front runner, always wins. You will often find that we hear the story of tortoise also catching up. So in one sense, this is a crucial part. So if I look at what is that when you are looking at IP in economic upscale, there is legal as well as technical. Not always law succeeds because we know law is a very slow moving species, right? It's a very, very slow moving species. So it is in this context, we need to look at both the sides. Now, what is the strategy? I briefly logged in the speaker before me. I think he was more elaborately doing, but if we put it in much smaller, steps, asset, priority, protection, valuation, and most important part is monetization. Quite often in my last 3 decades of IP experience, we are more on the number game rather than looking at the quality part of it. And the monetization is always on the quality part of it. The number part of it, it doesn't give you that kind of margins. But sometimes numbers are important to get that feeling going on, right? So this is one which I wanted to, tell. So let me summarize in few slides what I have in mind in a macro perspective. If you are really looking this particular thing from a legal perspective, as I said earlier, R&D innovation. Now, when I said the word law, I'm meaning IP. The technology delivery is more effectively, more efficiently happening today's world in this particular funnel, which I call R&D, innovation, and IP. Having said this, as I said, as I said, where is the law business coming in? Because I am a law university, I'm talking this. It's an interface. We are not creating innovation as legal eagles here. It is an interface effectively taking your creation and giving you the right. Why rights? We don't need a big research survey. Incentive. Rights gives you incentive. Incentive in turns, puts things in place. So end of the day, remember, it's a limited monopoly. That's the difference between property and intellectual property. And also making innovation as a culture. If you look at some of them who are in the forefront, say Japan, if you really look, apart from targets, etc., it has been a regular lifestyle of bringing in innovation. Probably that is a very, very crucial part when you're really looking, where do you start? How do you bring in, in the early stages of education, linking with industry, it should be a culture. Linking innovation definitely gives you a delivery system, and linking investment finally brings in technology. And the last, part of that is the economic development. So this is one of the crucial things. As I said, it's an incentive. It also has a penal thing as not only as enabler, effective enforcement. Without that, there is no point in giving incentive, because, the easier way is to imitate. The easier way is to, copy. And so that is a very, very crucial part, which a proper system of legal system of IP capacity building in terms of lawyers, in terms of courts, all these are all important. To avoid reinventing the wheel, that's very, very crucial, which we are generally good at. What happens is the whole system of IP, in my opinion, is the first right to information system, which we call in Indian context. You know what is what. Even you want to start a research, just do a patent search, you will know where we are. So this is one of the crucial part which I wanted to highlight. So if I look at it, of course, it is not without problems. If I are going to ignore and close our eyes, IP will not succeed. R&D, business model, delivery, and remember, access. In pandemic, we must have felt it very big. Universalization of vaccine. Why vaccine should not be given free? People ask. So the question of access, if it is not addressed, IP is not going to succeed as a public policy. So you need to balance, all these things. On one side, incentive, another side, access. This is, in my opinion, is one of the important strong foundation or a right economic upscale. If you really look, every nation has done that. So if I look again, what is the link? Inspiration as innovation, innovation as disclosure, disclosure as commercial success. Most importantly, it is this era of economic upscale that you can scale up from local to global arena. Not so in agrarian economy, not so in industrial economy. It's very, very tedious, a lot of gambling. Whereas knowledge economy, through its spread, and the love of technology throughout the globe, even a very, very small player has a chance to get into global arena if he has the right type of innovation and protected by intellectual property rights. So I think for what of time, because I prepared thinking I'm going to start at 5, but it be delayed, so I'm going to skip some slides to go to my conclusion at this point of time, so that I will also have the opportunity to hear my co-panelists and then maybe address few questions. I will just skip few of this. It's not a big thing to talk because mostly most people will know what I'm talking. So I'm skipping 5 of my strategy thing, but this is very important because I'm addressing IP Fest, which physically is part of Ahmedabad. This is a crucial difference I want to tell about our creativity as well as monetization. I think many of you know Dasrath Patel co-founded the National Institute of Design. His philosophy when he said was, don't make things for your own surprise. You'll be like a baker, every day making the same round bread to sell. So it's like I call it as aesthetic. But where the West, to an extent, managed to do was combining aesthetics with monetization. And this was done by none other than Steve Jobs. So Apple, everybody looks it for the design, but it's not just only design and stops in aesthetics, convert that into monetization, into a working proposition. And this will, in a sense, I used to feel these two quotes which I've been hearing, that in a sense, it's also slightly defining East and West. Probably East is very good in aesthetics, but lagging in terms of converting this into monetization. Whereas this is very good happening in other places. So this is one which I want to tell. And if you really look at economic upscale, I would just only the story of Swarovski earlier. Like this gentleman could not give some costly diamonds to his wife, but he made some, cut crystals in his workshop and gave her. And that spread wild among our circle. And then there was no looking back for Swarovski. And today, you wear a diamond, nobody inquires you. But if you wear a Swarovski, everybody asks what it is. And let me tell you, it is linking arts, science, and economics. This is what they say, the story of Swarovski. So with this, I would like to close my, what I call as presentation, and look forward to my co-panelist and other things. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Vivekanand, for having took us through the entire process and the journey that our economy has been through, from being an agricultural economy now to striving to be a creative economy, and how the fact of monetization is something which is very important. And with monetization, what is actually also required is the creation of IP and its access to the masses. So I think this is where, as a country, we need to work upon, and I'm sure that with Dr. Hemang's session, we are going to certainly get some quick tips on how we can ensure the access properly. So if I may just briefly introduce our next speaker for the session, Dr. Hemang Shah. He's associated with Qualcomm Technology Licensing India, and he's been associated with Qualcomm as for the past 14 years as a senior engineer and head of IP. And at Qualcomm, the main focus is on assisting startups and licensing and licensees who may productize the 5G, IoT, and AI-based devices. And their startup and Qualcomm also is working upon new business developments and strategies for startups. And they also work on IP education, and they organize workshops to discuss the patent and business topics. And while I was just having a talk over the phone with Hemang Shah, he said that a teacher and a professor is still alive in him, and that's why he takes interest in organizing workshop and ensuring that the knowledge is something that reaches to the masses. as far as IP is concerned. So I welcome you, Dr. Hemang, for being here with us and talking to us on this important issue. So over to you, Dr. Hemang.
Thank you, Gunjan, and thank you, Prof. Vivekanand. This was truly a masterclass which you presented in a very short amount of time. Also, thank you to Angela and the IPPO Foundation for inviting me over here. Now, I do not have slides, but I just thought of sharing a few perspectives. Most of it is from my personal journey as an innovator and an inventor, and then lately to the role which I wear at work. Although I must say, as a disclaimer, I'm here in a personal capacity. So my journey started, in the world of IP, on a very weird note, almost in a sense of hindsight. I belong to a Pakka Gujju business family, which is in the area of textile trading. My grandfather started this business in the market where I think Dhirubhai Ambani also started his business. For those of you who know, it's called the MJ market of textiles. It's a bunch of wholesalers who are there. My father joined him, as the tradition was at the time, and he helped him grow the business. My father had one knack of looking at designs that would work well. So they were wholesalers, so you could buy the cloths in either plain colors or you could get prints on them. Now, my father had a knack for looking at which prints may work well with his clientele. And his clients were mostly in the western part of the country and in South India. So he would work on the process side with the different karigars who would make those designs. He would take big risks and bring those textiles out of the market. If those work, he could command a very good premium, 30 to 50% more than what he could sell the plain cloth for. If the designs did not work, because as humans, it's not necessary that people may like whatever you sell them, then he ate all the loss. So he was taking a huge risk. His designs were often the first to hit our market. And when I asked him that, hey, how long will this lead last? And he said, it's pretty much for a couple of months until people are fast movers. They figure out that, hey, this thing is working, and then it's I would say fast copying in some sense. So there's no discussion around IP, no discussion around could we partner, share our knowledge with someone else, and cross license partnering. None of that was there. So that's how I guess my introduction to this world, that hey, you're taking such a big risk and there is no protection out here. Fast forward, I am a graduate student. I'm pursuing my PhD as professor earlier in the earlier session was sharing, Dr. Manoharan. He was talking about displays, and my research was in the area of displays. I was working on liquid crystals. I was figuring out how to make our displays work better, playing with carbon nanotubes. And that's where the idea of innovation was soared into me. That's where I learned that this work that we are exploring as something new can be patented. And my university also had a tech transfer division, where they would take the IP which was developed by the professors, and they would enable businesses that wanted access to that technology. I started working for Qualcomm, and my journey as an inventor grew at the time. As I was sharing with Gunjan, there's at one point of time I wanted to be a professor. So I thought probably a few years of industry experience will change that. But I realized that when I helped others invent around me, I got an even bigger joy. And you could see that from Dr. Manoharan also, right? That he was talking about how he inspired a student to invent, and you can see there's an extra sparkle and an extra smile on his face. So I started helping others invent around me, got opportunities to work on our patent portfolio. Again, fast forward to 2015, we were thinking of starting a design ecosystem for startups in India. I've always believed India has had amazing talent in engineering. We are well known for software. For hardware, the talent was always there. What was not necessarily present was the means to take those hardware ideas out to market. And so we started working on what is called as Qualcomm Design in India Challenge. You can see this virtual background. It's a part of the Qualcomm Design in India program. Now, what this challenge is, it's a roughly 9-month incubation cycle where we get hundreds of applications from startups across the country. These are all in domains of or broadly classified as Internet of Things, IoT. They cover a variety of applications from drones to medtech to edge compute, uh, basically anything which requires compute on the edge, anything which requires strong connectivity. So we help bring those ideas out to market. When we started this journey, we thought that why not we teach what we practice also. And again, the reason for this is a startup is found on a premise that something is lacking in the market. You're getting a product which is not meeting expectations. That product is inferior, at least in the eyes of the founder. And they're like, I can make this better. My team can put our minds and really bring about a remarkable innovation. It could apply to a service also, but a startup is found on the very premise that we can make a big difference. And that's where the seed of innovation is the strongest. And that's really the right time to identify the potential IP that those founders and their team members will create over the next few years. So we started teaching them the importance of IP. In 2015-16 timeframe, out of, let's say, the number of startups that we would talk to, maybe 10 or 15% of them were IP aware. And this is a small sample size. I'm not including every SME which is out there in the country. These are only startups which are predominantly engineering based. At least their founders have strong engineering backgrounds, engineering degrees, or work experience. They are working on the hardware side of things. Now, it's about 6 years, and I would say that more than 90% of them are IP aware. Now, some things have changed also in the market. As Prof. Vivekanandan was sharing earlier, there is an aspect of valuation. So in 2015-16 timeframe, there were VCs who would just ask as a check mark, have you filed for IP? No, they didn't really care. The answer could be yes or no, but they were not so much focused on whether a startup had IP. Now, today, I'm used to seeing VCs asking the question around what is the quality of IP that you're filing. So as these people have become more focused, startups have figured out that, hey, it's not just me filing a provisional application and simply saying that, hey, I have filed a patent. They have to prove to some sense that they are building a portfolio, because that kind of helps them in the valuation journey when it comes to fundraising. I want to spend some time talking of the applications that are building, so you get a flavor for actually what's happening in India to some sense. Now, one of the startups that we picked last year, today, just a few minutes ago, I was checking on LinkedIn. They are building underwater drones. This is a startup out of IIT Madras. They are doing an inspection of railway bridges. As you know, we have a large railway network, a lot of bridges which are built over, let's say, rivers. Now, what's happening at the bottom? So typically, I guess they would have someone swim down and say, "Are theek hai ya nahi hai?" And that's a very crude way of I guess estimating the health of our bridge network. These guys are actually getting an underwater drone, swim, carry. They are imaging a fabulous amount of detail. They are doing all the analysis. So this startup is called as Planus, an amazing set of folks, and are very IP savvy. They have built a portfolio of about 20 plus patents, and it's going to grow. The startup has the right set of focus. Another startup that we worked with, they are doing wound diagnostics on, I would say, a phone sort of a device. The problem that they saw was, let's say there's someone who's suffering from an infection. Typically what happens is that if there's pus or something which collects around the infection, the doctor orders for a culture test. Someone collects the culture, it goes out, comes back, then you visit the doctor again. All this process can take a couple of days at least. More realistically, you're looking at maybe 3 to 4 days before the patient knows whether the wound is progressing well or something that could be done better. Now, these folks, it's called Adivo, they're based out of Chennai. They have built AI algorithms that look at wounds, and within about an hours of time, they can predict whether the wound is progressing well or not. So it's an amazing I would say it's not replacing the doctor, but it's an amazing, auxiliary device that the doctor can use. Similarly, we have someone who's doing blood bag monitoring. Blood bags are being transported all across the country, all across cities, but we don't know what temperature they are going at. Now, there are companies just which are solving these. Now, I could never think of these applications because, again, for a startup to be successful, they need to really identify with that pain point. It needs to resonate with them, and that's why they go build businesses out of it later on. I enjoy enabling them. And so I'm happy to share that, in the 77 plus startups that we have incubated, collectively, they have launched more than 20 plus products. They have raised more than $110 million of funding. And importantly, and this is where I kind of take, some pride in sharing that they are building a good patent portfolio for themselves. They have filed for more than 200 plus patents of their own. Another important thing, which Professor Vivekanandan alluded to, was that global coverage, because the problems that these folks are solving, like the underwater drone or the wound diagnostics, that's not just an India problem. When these startups are launching their businesses, they think of the problem which they are seeing around themselves. But a few years down the line, the market is much bigger. Yesterday, a startup told me that the building management system that they are developing has found like a lot of interest from Qatar. So now they are going to set up an operations out there. So as these startups realize that the market is not just India, they are filing their patents not just in US but EU and other regions also. So that's another important part which they have to realize. And true to the nature of patents and all IP is a territorial right, and you've got to be cognizant about what your true market is. And finally, I think the last segment which Gunjan mentioned about me doing workshops, I think like many of you today who've spoken, I have also interacted, done a lot of workshops with people. A pain point which I saw was that while we are there talking with say startups and SMEs, we share our knowledge with them, we share what we think is the best thing for them. But what happens when we are not present? At that point of time, they don't really have a go-to person or a go-to thing. So we took this pain point and we shared this with DPIIT and with NLU Delhi. So NLU Delhi team, they saw input and they wrote a program called as L2 Pro. It stands for Learn to Protect, Secure, and Maximize Your Inventions. It's a completely free app which is there on Android Play Store as well as iOS Store. You can access it on the website also. It's an IP education app written specifically for startup and SME founders. So it's not meant to make someone a legal professional or an IP professional, but it's meant for that founder who's looking at IP as one of the things. But the main thing, the crux for doing this thing was that if they notice something which is interesting around themselves, around their colleagues, a light bulb should go off in the head. That here's where I need to call my IP counsel. Here's where I need to call my prof, my friend, whoever is doing the actual hands-on work on intellectual property. So that's sort of how we've done. And L2 Pro has so far touched more than 2,500 students, although they are founders and SMEs. We really hope that a lot more founders, really join this bandwagon of IP awareness. Because if you look at the government incentives for startups and SMEs, to me, it's the right time to take advantage of all those incentives. The culture is there. So I think it's good time to be inventing and innovating in India. So with this, let me pause and I'll look forward to further exchange with Prof. Vivekanandan, and if there are any questions that either Gunjan or any attendees have, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hemang, for helping us know that how assisting startups could actually do wonders for our nation's economy, as well as how a global coverage of the new ideas that these startups come up with can actually help us mobilize the economy of of all the nations together. And also the information on L2 Pro. I'm sure there must be people in the audience out there who might want to get some quick guidance as far as knowledge on IP is concerned. So I'm sure they are going to look up to what L2 Pro does, and how it can help them. So thank you so much, Dr. Hemang, for being here with us. Now I'll just that there are a few questions that are there. So the first question that I have is for Professor Vivekanand. And sir, the question is that what are some of the lucrative avenues of investment if we talk about research and innovation? And if we talk about India as a country, how can we achieve a sustained growth pattern, especially considering that the entire world is hit by the pandemic and the economy has been adversely affected. So if there are certain lucrative avenues that we can look for investment in research and innovation.
Well, I need to ask the questioner how much money he's having now, right, to talk about the type of investment. But obviously, I will say, come out with vaccines. Because, frankly speaking, where is India's strength? I will tell you. As you said, that generally Chinese strength is considered as in, machinery and tools has been there. India's strength has always been on areas of software, as Mr. Mangsha is from Qualcomm. I think all the majors have. Why they think? Because there's a very big storehouse in terms of, I think Indians do have edge on mathematics, whereas Chinese have a dexterity with their arms. That's why they are good badminton champions or table tennis champions. So Indians' dexterity is a lot to do with mathematics, algorithm, and after all, Indians are argumentative, right? So in that sense, I would we really look at no, in that. Of course, China is again not going to supply the entire thing. Definitely, India has a thing, and but I would say very interestingly in science, traditional long-term investment thing, India has been strong on pharma and biotech. So, well, Indian pharma excelled when it was a generic regime, pre-2005, when product patents were not there. But we have upskilled a lot, which means that 70s to 2000, when pre-trips, I call it, when it allowed us, India turned out to be the pharmacy of the world, one they say, which means we did a reverse capacity building. Colleges, see, because generic medicines are needed, then you started factories, you need graduates. So we started putting pharmacy colleges later only. All colleges came after 70. So it is a different model of backward integration, what happened. So definitely pharma and biotech are, in my opinion, as long as we said that world is a mysterious place, and God also favors a lot of bacteria and virus over human beings. So naturally, pharma and biotech is going to be generally a very long-term proposition. And India, in my opinion, has a great advantage compared to many, many nations, including China, I would call it. China is good in bulk drugs, but India has been doing our own Covaxin is, of course, compared to the other one, which had a lot of, foreign involvement. Covaxin has been a lot of indigenization, what I would call it. And then your Zydus is coming out from Gujarat. So this is definitely a factor which will be one part of the story. And one more thing which I want to tell in the beginning, when I told knowledge economy and creative economy, this astrological prediction is difficult in the world, the way cycles are moving very fast. So long-term lucrative means you should keep your eyes open what is lucrative at a point of time. It is not going to be like, next 5 years, 10 years, this is going to be stable, because business cycles, which I said, is completely changing in many ways. So our strength is in service, our strength is in soft skills, our strength is in certain areas of knowledge economy, I would call. Our industrial economy, we are good in making products which may not have a big edge outside. But, this should be, in my opinion, People need to look at this area. If hardcore science and technology, I still consider pharma and biotech will be one important area which India will be a player for the time to come.
Thank you so much, Professor. I'm sure what you've said is definitely true, and it is going to help us in future also if we think of investing in the pharmaceutical and biotechnology. So the next question here is for Dr. Hemang, and it pertains to the SMEs. Basically, we're seeing that SMEs are plagued with major challenges, especially when they are in their initial years, and this actually comes to question their very survival. So are there any quick tips on how harnessing IP would help them overcome all of these hurdles?
Uh, sure. I think that the couple of ways to I guess look at this problem. I think the first one, when it comes to IP and innovation, especially, that potential is the highest at the infancy stage. Because again, go back to why that SME or anyone who started that business in the first place, because they saw something which was not working to their expectation, and they want to introduce their unique spin, their unique take on either the problem or the solution, right? So that's where the potential for innovation and IP is the highest, in my opinion. The second way to think about this is resilience, because and as I think this is where I would refer to this book called as the innovator's dilemma, or rather the innovator's solution. An SME or a startup can kind of think about taking on an incumbent uh, when they are introducing with their product in the market. They might be targeting a segment, a customer segment, which is not being served yet. It's not large yet, but they feel that, hey, this is going to be developing. Either that, or they are offering a feature which they think that, hey, it's missing, it's not so important right now, but in the near term, or say mid-term, it's going to take on importance. Just as an example, like think of, we are having this conversation over Zoom. About 2 years ago, none of us would have really thought of opening up an account on Zoom, but now it has become a necessity. Now put yourself in the shoes of the Zoom founders who started this business, who were that visionary. Again, I don't think anyone could have seen this fast forwardness that the pandemic brought us to collectively work from home at the global level. But they saw something. But what was required was, in the time that, because you cannot predict when the market will truly lap up your product. So you have to figure out ways to build resilience. And that resilience can come either through keeping your cost under control. It could mean hustling and figuring out a small but niche customer base that can either pay your premium or keep your startup running. What I've seen, at least in the context of Indian hardware startups and all that, they are a lot more methodical. They're a lot more sensible. They don't have really large cash burns. So they're able to sustain for a much longer period of time. However, if you look at some of the other segments where the cost or their marketing can spiral out of control, I think that's what puts them at risk. So it's two things. One is the potential for the innovation is highest at the beginning, but a startup or an SME has to focus on how can they make themselves resilient for the next 2 to 3 years.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hemang, for those notes that one must take into account if they are coming up or with a new business, or they are strategizing their own business or startups. So I think this brings us to the end of the second session for the IP Fest 2021. And I'm sure the participants have been able to take the best out of both of these sessions. And now I would like to give it over to Anjula madam for officially ending this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gunjan. I think that was very elaborate and nice. And thank you, Dr. V.C. Vivekanandan, for that beautiful presentation, as always, and always innovative that we get to through it. And thank you, Dr. Hemang. I think that was a real good perspective in terms of the various IT kind of things that are really coming up and how it is going to help the new innovators kind of take advantage of that. So thank you, both the speakers on this panel. I would like to thank the other speakers in the earlier session and Dr. Nidhi Buch as well. Both the moderators have kind of steered the sessions very well. So thank you so very much, all of you. Now I would also like to say thanks to the participants who have taken their time out to attend this. Along with that, I would like to put a note of thanks to TIE, Ahmedabad, and GCCI for participating in this IP Fest. If Priyali is around, I would like to just get her on board. I think with some internet issues, she is not around. All right, so with that IP Fest, we will try to conclude this today. I request the speakers to be available with us with the kind of support that you have always been giving to IPPO in getting us, spreading the word across to the people. So we hope that you all enjoyed being on this session as much as we having you on board. So with that, I would like to conclude the session. Thank you very much for your time and participation in this.
Thank you, Anjula.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Hemang sir. Thank you, VC sir. Thank you,
See you in
Gunjan.
Ahmedabad.
Sorry, sir.
Hope to catch you in person in Ahmedabad.
Absolutely, sir. We are just hoping that the situation is getting all of us out of our residences now, and we should be able to kind of now look forward to meeting each other instead of just seeing each other over a video call or such sessions going forward.
I am also catching a glimpse of Jatin Bhai here.
Jatin Bhai, thank you, sir, for coming
The great
across.
secret how he is becoming younger and younger every year.
Sir,
I have to ask Gopi to explain to me. Right?
sir, I look forward to see you in person then sooner.
Yep. Definitely. Pleasure.
A personal thanks to Hemang and VC, and I believe the rest of the speakers too. And thanks Gunjan and Nidhi for
and thanks to all the university support that all you people are getting across to the IPPO as well, right? So whether it is GNLU, whether it is Nirma Institute or PDPU or say Karnavati. So thanks to the universities and the support IPPO has been receiving. And we look forward to having the same support going forward. Welcome, Gopi ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gopi.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Hemang bhai.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Jatin
Nidhi,
Bhai.
Gunjan.
Thank you, participants.
Thank you.
For
Thank
this
you.
appreciation. Perfect.
Yeah, nice meeting all of you virtually. So
Yeah.
take
Same
care.
here. Thank you
Bye.
for making the IP Fest another
Bye.
success.
see you.
Thank you.
See you.
Bye-bye.
See you all.